Hello, everybody. This is Shelby Anderson, Marketing Content Manager at Minitab. Thank you for joining our webinar today, Better Process, Better Outcome, Better Product, using Minitab for superior quality in food manufacturing. I'll hand it over to our presenter, Antonio Vargas, in a few moments, but first, just a few housekeeping notes. The webinar audio is available through your computer or dial-in number. For the best audio quality, please make sure your speakers or headsets are turned on and the volume is up. Some networks cause slides to advance more slowly than others. You might need to log off your VPN to help if you see that issue. This webinar is being recorded. We will send the presentation and recording by email afterwards, so no worries if you need to drop off or want to review anything later. Your mics are muted, but please feel free to enter questions at any time in the questions pane. You should be able to find that on the right side of your screen in GoToWebinar. We do capture all the questions and try our best to answer them. We will have time at the end for Q&A with our presenter, during which Antonio will do his best to answer all the questions. And finally, we will be sending you a couple questions after the webinar is over, so we appreciate it if you could take a few minutes to answer those. Now, I'd like to introduce you to our presenter, Antonio Vargas. Antonio is a Minitab Solutions architect with over 20 years of experience applying and teaching data analytics tools to solve business problems in manufacturing, engineering, supply chain, finance, and human resources. He has so much experience, so with that, I'm just going to hand it over to Antonio.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. It's going to be an exciting and interesting conversation. And before we start, we would like to take a poll. Actually, we'd like to get an idea who is joining us and what is your level of knowledge about the tools that we're going to talk about today, the control chart, measurement system analysis, and process capability. So you can please, you can see the poll there in front of you. You can give us an idea to understand, know the ones who are joining us, what is your level of knowledge about these tools. And I can see, we start to see some responses, like we have a good mix. Some of you have a basic understanding, perhaps the reason why you're joining this webinar. Some of you have been exposed to it and are very familiar and feel comfortable applying the tools. That's great. Good to know. Yeah, seems like a little bit on the basic understanding. So that's awesome. Now let's move on to next question. We would like also not only to know your knowledge of the tools themselves, but also how much do you know about Minitab? Have you heard about it before? You've been maybe a current expert user. So we would like to know. You can please give us again some of your feedback to help us understand the level of detail that perhaps we can present. And we start to get some of the responses. Thank you very much. We can see some of you are current Minitab enthusiasts. And thank you very much for coming back. And the intent today is to show some of these tools that I talk about, and perhaps some things that you haven't seen before in Minitab. Perhaps some of you have used them before. A couple of concepts that can be beneficial moving forward. So welcome again, and thank you for choosing this Minitab webinar. And it's about food. Who doesn't like it? So for some of you who may have joined us just now, I am Antonio Vargas, and I want to invite you to take a taste at today's menu. This is what we have prepared for you, and we have a selection of options that have been tailored to indulge your senses and your curiosity particularly. So we're going to have for appetizers a brief conversation about what the industry trends are, the food industry trends are. And then we're going to be moving on to our house specials. And for that, I mentioned earlier, we're going to be looking at control charts, measurement system analysis, and process capability analysis. And of course, at the end, to top it off, we are going to be answering questions. If for some reason, many questions pour over and we don't have enough time to answer them, we may have to back them up, to go back, and we'll follow up with you guys later on with a more precise answer to your questions. So speaking of the industry trends, I got to say early on in my career, I had the opportunity to work in the food industry, particularly frozen food producer, and later on I worked also for a carbonated soft drink manufacturer. And it was very easy and fast to realize how big, how complex the food industry can be. I mean, it's many branches, many processes, many opportunities. That makes it challenging, makes it exciting, so to speak. So, and that's why when it was, we were talking about this webinar, I said, yeah, I think it's something I find very interesting. So regardless of which segment of food industry you are, you can see here on the screen we have some bullet points. I think we all agree that the market is becoming more competitive. There are more additional need for being more fast response to our customer. And in fact, some of the research I did suggests that, summarize it in a simple phrase, which is an eye on the consumer is key to success. And I agree. I think we all agree. We can agree that, again, with all these trends going on, more sustainability, value for what we offer to our customers, I think is more important now than ever that we learn some of the tools that can help us improve our quality, optimize delivery, and of course, reduce costs while we are delivering value to our customers. For that purpose, that's what the focus of today's conversation is going to be, some of those tools that can help us for that reason. So what we have here for first house special is control charts. And the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to show an example of how the tool can be used. Of course, again, I mentioned that some of you may be different industry even, or different branch of the food industry. The idea is how the tools can be applied to solve problems. I mean, I'm going to be specific to food industry. In this example, it's going to be about this coffee producer. And seems like they store their green coffee beans in some warehouse, and they determine that temperature is a critical factor of the process. They need to maintain it stable, and they want to find out. They want to know, is that the case? If not, of course, they may need to do something about it. So they have these food processing engineers. They go ahead and they record the temperature of the warehouse over the course of a day. They're capturing this information. There's some thermometer of some kind, and that's how they capture what they need to know. So before I go on and show you how to do it in Minitab and show you charts and numbers, let's talk about for a minute what is a control chart. And we can say, generally speaking, a control chart is a way to plot your process data in a time order sequence. And we will see how the changes happen over time in your process, in your data. So essentially what we have, we're going to show you in a minute, we have a center line and then we have upper control limit, lower control limit. It's very important, this tool, to help us, as we mentioned here, identify any potential trends or pattern in the data. And you think about it, is what we call the voice of the process. What is the process telling us? How is the behavior of the process happening over time? And for that reason, it's relatively visual and relatively simple to identify special causes from common causes of variation. And what we call any process has variation. Things happen, and there's natural variation. But when something abnormal, something out of the ordinary happens, is that what we call a special cause. So the next question is, okay, Antonio, yeah, you're talking about these control charts, but I know there are different types of control charts. Which one should I use? Well, I can tell you, first of all, it's going to depend on what data you're looking at. Are you using continuous data that is measured in a continuous scale, so to speak, in a way that is, we can call it variable data as well? Or is it attribute data where we classify or count? So that is the number one. Then we want to look at, well, I want to see how the data is moving with respect to a center line, so the average or the mean. I want to see how it's moving, but also want to quantify the variation, not only how it moves with respect to the mean, but also how much is changing over time. So in the example I'm going to show, we can see this is what we have so far. We're looking at temperature. and that implies, it's something that is in a continuous scale. Again, I use some thermometer. I can have 74.2 or 74.996. I mean, that's what we mean by continuous data. So in this case, we have variable data, continuous data, and when we see in the second column, we see the date and time. So that suggests that the data was collected, one at a time. You see some certain interval that happened from reading to reading. And most important, because in this case, once we take the temperature of a particular moment, a particular day, a particular second, we can go back and check the same temperature, of course. So that is data that we're not going to be able to measure again. For that reason, when I look at this data, I say, well, you know what? This is captured individually. We're going to assume this is individually captured. And that's what we're talking about here. It was not in subgroups, but more what we call is individual. Subgroup will be if we were in batches of data. Now I'm going to show an example later on, but in this case, from what we see, the data was collected individually, and that's what we're going to do. So we're going to use Minitab to show you how to perform this study. Again, we're going to be looking at what we call a individual moving range chart. I'm going to switch over my screen here. I have the example in Minitab. You're going to see what is going on here. And some of you are experienced using Minitab, perhaps have used version 18, perhaps you are looking at transition into version 19. Some of you, the first time you have seen Minitab. So what we see here essentially is the first thing you open Minitab, that's what you will see. In this case, I already have my data pre-populated, but I can tell you, essentially you will have this navigator on the left, you have the output window and the input window. Try to keep it simple. And I can toggle here between different views. On the bottom right-hand side, you can see that. I'm going to go back to the data. That's the main way how we organize the data. On the top, we see different menus, and the intent of today's webinar is not to review everything, of course. I want to be very specific. And we're going to go in particular to this menu. This is called Stat. Stat, I'm going to click on it, and I'm looking at control charts. So I'm going to go control chart. You see it's just following the path, control charts, I continue, and I see there are different type of control charts. Again, based on my knowledge using these tools and based on what I read in the script, I know, again, I'm going to be looking at individuals. I'm going to be individual readings that were captured that way. And I have different ways to capture it. And I'm going to be looking at IMR. And by the way, you see that little window that popped up? That happens in Minitab. And I believe it's a good way to remind you what the tool is about or give you a brief description on what the tool does. So that way, when you move your mouse over, you will see that coming up. So and you will see that throughout the presentation. If that comes up too many times, I'm going to do that on purpose. It's just the way that works in Minitab. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this button. And again, in Minitab, you have this window, right, where you have different options to choose from. And the good news is you will see on this variable box only what you can select from the many options. In this case, I only have 2 columns, but if you have more columns, it will only show the ones that I can use for this type of study. In this case, I'm going to use temperature. And say I'm interested on doing a control chart of temperature. Select temperature, I double click on it, and because I have the date and time that the data was collected, I'm going to use something here on this scale button, stamp. And I'm going to, what it's doing, I'm going to put at the bottom of my chart, I'm going to select this date and time to show when the data was collected. And you'll see what is important. I'm going to click OK on this. Another thing I want to do, I'm going to click on these IMR options. And again, in Minitab, you're going to have multiple options to do many things. My recommendation, start with the simple, basic things. And as you learn, become more proficient with the tools in Minitab, you can expand, or perhaps you have a specific need, you can do all additional things. For now, I'm only going to select this tab called Test. Okay. This, what it does, is going to help me, again, understand are there any patterns, any trends, any out of control conditions, any special causes that I need to address. For that purpose, you see in this case, the default is selecting only one test. I'm going to go ahead and select all tests. I want to make sure I test for all special causes. And you see, it changes automatically. I'm not going to read all of this, but when you have a chance, you will be able to understand what it all means. The different built-in tests here in Minitab. I'm going to click OK. I'm going to click OK. And this is what we have. And again, I'm going to switch over, and that's the chart, the output that we get from Minitab. I want to switch back to our script so we can see what we need to do next. All right, so let's look at the results. Well, seems like the coffee beans look good enough, but what about the process is in control or not? That's the main question. I mean, yeah, that's great, but let's look at the process control, if it's in control or not. This is the chart that I showed earlier, a couple of seconds ago in Minitab here. And anything you see, and in this case, I want to ask you if you want to put in the chat box somewhere there, anything you have seen, what do you see about this graph? Anything abnormal, anything unusual that gets your attention, anything you may see, you want to put in the chat box, any comments, you're more than welcome to participate there. So let's look at what we have here. So again, a control chart is the data plotted over time. You see these are the readings that these engineers, these technicians took over time. And in the individual chart, it gives you this center line, you see the green line, which is the average or the mean of all the measurements. And then these red lines, we have the upper control limit and lower control limit, which are calculated using the data. It's something that is done automatically here, depending on the data we have. That is done, in fact, it's plus or minus 3 sigma. That's what we call that, how these control limits are calculated of the data. And we have that, and then we have the bottom, we have the moving range, which in the moving range is similar, but we're looking at the variation from data point to data point. Remember, this is individual readings. So anything we see, well, I can right away capture a level of issues here. I can see here something is going on. It seems like a little bit of a trend going up. You see there's a random variation, and all of a sudden a little bit of a trend going up in the individual readings. And also, if I look at the AMR chart, something that was going on, it went up, and then something went down. Also, some kind of decreasing trend. That doesn't mean it's bad. It's just something. Something is going on. Something's happening. I have additional data points here. Certainly, this is not good. This is outside of the control limit. So something happened here. I have another one over here. And essentially, that's what we see. There's something going on in this case that I would like to understand, and I want to see what's going on. So remember, I showed you this test in Minitab. Well, these little numbers you may see here, so I was drawing the circle. You see some numbers, 1, 2, 5, 6. Those are the tests that Minitab is doing and taking for you on the data. So we can see that in this case, for the eye chart, individual chart, is some data points failed test 5 and some test 6. And it explains, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but you can see there were some situations going on. And it tells me particularly which of those, what are the answers where the issues happen. So the question for you is, what would you do? So we have these situations here and the eye chart MR. So what would you do? Any ideas? You want to type in your comments in the chat box. What do you see? Any particular issues you encounter with this data, and what would you do? I'm going to give you a couple of seconds. Based on what we see about this process, what corrective action would you take? Overall, first thing is whatever I have this out of control condition like we show here, or any trends or patterns, the first thing is go investigate. Go find out what happened. unfortunately, when we collected the data, when these engineers went and collected the data, they recorded the date and time. So we can always go back perhaps to the logs they may have, additional information. We can go ask the people working in the particular place what happened. There could be some equipment malfunction or some other variation or other situation that happened. This spike in the data. So that's one of the things that you will do, and that's how you will use a control chart. Look at the data, understand the voice of the process, and try to understand why is this process behavior happening. That is going to help you understand potential causes and, of course, address those causes later on. Now, I show you how to do it what we call the traditional way. I'm going to show you something some of you may have used in the past or maybe new with it. Is what we call the assistant. So I'm going to switch back to our data. Now I'm going to show you, see this guy, the way I did it, the traditional way, I would say. I'm going to go now and use the assistant. You see on the top menu, we have multiple options. I'm going to click this last option we have, assistant. Click on it, and you will see you have multiple options to choose from. I'm interested on doing a control chart. I'm going to click control chart, and again, when I hover my mouse over, you can see a description of the tool, and I get this roadmap. And this roadmap is going to help me choose not only a control chart, but the correct control chart I should use depending on what type of data I have and all that kind of good stuff. So, and if for some reason I forgot, it was a couple of years maybe when I got, my green belt, or I got exposed to this type of terminology, well, you can always click on the particular button in Minitab and gives you examples on what the different type of data are. So that's convenient there. And again, if how do you collect the data? Well, I don't remember what is a subgroup. Well, here again gives you a description on how to differentiate between is it individual data or is it subgroups and what is a subgroup. So I'm not gonna get in a lot of details at this moment, but particularly that's a way you will do it. I know from the data I collected already and I was looking at is individual. It was not in subgroups. So I'm going to choose this IMR chart. And again, you have more options here. You want to get it in more detail, understand how to collect the data, recommendations on how to use the chart. You can have a good time there. I want to click on that. And by now you see the format, how Minitab does this calculations and analysis is pretty much similar. You have some window here with the data you can choose from. And I says select the data column. And I know I'm going to do temperature. And it is asking me here, how are you going to determine how do you want Minitab to calculate the control limit and the center line? If I click here, I have two options. One can be estimated from the data, or if I already perhaps I did some studies before, or I have historical data I can use that. In this case, I'm assuming that the first time I do this control chart, I want Minitab to estimate the center line and control limits from the data itself. And it right away gives me a little warning sign here. Say, what's going on? Something is happening. And it's telling me, well, it seems like the process may not be quite stable. I could always exclude some of these points or keep them here. I'm going to keep them here just to illustrate the point on how the tool works. But of course, you will have to make the best decision depending on what is that you are trying to achieve. So I'm going to click OK. And this is what Assistant does for you. It's going to give you a series of diagnoses and tools that can help you, at least give you indication on how to interpret the data, and it gives you this summary report. And right away, I see this color graph looks like on the green, so that may be a good sign, right? Well, yeah, it seems like the process seems to be there's no out of control points. In fact, we didn't see any out of control in the individual chart. And it's telling me here the process mean is stable, no data points are out of control. And we validated that. There's a trend over here, but nothing out of control necessarily. I want to keep going down. And again, now I look at the stability report, and it gives me some something to look for, if it's a global trend, or if I'm looking at some drift and shift. And when I look at, in this case, the moving range chart, we detected this out of control points here. And again, to move my mouse over, it will tell me exactly which one it is. And sure enough, Minitab is giving me the summary at the bottom. These data points are out of control. That's something we need to investigate and find out what's going on. Moving on, I also have this report card. And this report card summarizing or doing some pre-analysis, if you will, of what I already explained. And again, I have some warning signs that indicate I need to go and find out what's going on. I need to do additional research. I need to take care of additional issues here. And if I can read in detail, it seems like the process mean and variation combined may not be stable. In fact, yeah, we saw that there are some out of control points there and a trend that may not be satisfactory. So I'm going to go back to my script, and that's how you use the system to help you create this type of control chart and analyze and interpret the results. And that's how we get. And again, it's a summary of the type of screens we will get, the type of summary reports that we'll get, and again, a diagnosis. I can tell you in Minitab, you can also, there are some components here that you want to perhaps change the verbiage, the description. You can edit some of those. Otherwise, it gives you a good foundation how to start doing the analysis on your own. Okay, very good. That was control chart. Now, moving on, we're going to look at the second house special of the day, and that is measurement system analysis. So that is, I want to explain in a minute what it is, but if we want to understand when I'm measuring a process, like in the example we just talked about, and I see variation in the data, first question that comes to mind is the variation coming from the process itself, the variation of the process, or is perhaps the way I measure the process inducing that variation? So two different problems. They are fixed different ways. So that's what the tool is. So some food technicians, they may have taken, they may have been using Minitab for a while, and they say, let's do some study on a scale. They're measuring the weight of some items, apples, and it can be anything. In fact, it can be any type of measurement. It can be in the industry, any type of device that you use to measure something, you will want to perform some measurement system analysis study here, right? So in this case, they're looking at this scale. They want to see precisely, is the data variation they see coming from the process itself, or is it from the scale? Because of course, if the issue is with the measurement system, it will be very difficult, almost impossible sometimes, to fix the process when your readings are not correct to begin with. In this example, we're looking at, they have a lower specification limit of 100 grams and an upper specification limit of 110 grams. They collect three different technicians, collect data, and they measure each one of these 10 samples that they measure here twice. So that's how they do it. So three different people, three technicians, they want to measure different units, and they want to see if the measurement system is reliable. A couple of additional information about MSA. So when we talk about MSA, so I mentioned we want to understand where the variation coming from. Is it the way we measure things or the way we make them? Which is, again, different issue. So we need to understand that first, because understanding where the variation is coming from is going to help me get to root causes and really improve the process. At the same time, when we talk about measurement system analysis or measurement system, we need to keep in mind that it's not only the device itself, it's not only the person measuring things, it's not only the method, how we measure things, it's all combined. It's all three things that make the measurement more reliable or less reliable. For that reason, of course, I want to make sure that I understand all these three and how they can potentially impact the quality of the output. So first question, okay, what kind of analysis should I do? Well, let me explain a couple of things. As far as measurement system analysis is concerned, there are, generally speaking, overall two types of analysis. And again, it goes back to the basic premise of depends on what type of data you're dealing with. Are you looking at continuous data, something you can measure with some kind of device? You can measure actually. In that case, you will be looking at what we call gauge, repeatability, and reproducibility, or gauge R&R. Some of you may have heard that before. However, if I'm looking at how people make decisions, maybe it's a yes, no, on time, late, pass, fail, where we classify or count things, that would be more an attribute agreement analysis is the best tool to use in that case, in a particular situation, right? So, and of course, with many options, I'm sure you guys are gonna increase your appetite, right? We have many options to choose from here. So let's see what we can do. So for that, what we're gonna do is, you guessed it right, we're gonna use the assistant. I showed the assistant earlier. So now I wanna go here and I'm gonna open the worksheet where I have the data. And again, this is pre-populated in essence of time, but you will have to collect the data, put it in Minitab, organize it, and do the analysis. I'm gonna assume I already have the data here. We spend the time collecting the data, and I'm gonna use the assistant. But let me show you what the data looks like. So we have the sample number, in this case, unit number 1. It was measured twice by Jamie, and then twice by Jeremy, twice by Jill, and then it went to do the same thing for all 10 parts. So you can see the same unit was measured at least twice by 3 different people. So I'm going to go ahead and do assistant, and you see in options of menus here. In fact, measurement system analysis is the first to choose from. By now you have seen this a couple of times. It's a different tool, but it's still a roadmap that can help me understand what type of data am I looking at. In this case, we determine is variable or continuous measurement. I'm measuring something. And what I want to do, I already have the data in Minitab. I'm going to analyze. I'm going to click OK here. And now I need to enter the data. I already have it selected here. Operators, I want to say the technician, the parts. These are the units or samples I took. And the measurement is the weight for each one of these units, or perhaps these apples, whatever the case is here. Now, it's asking me, how would you like to estimate the process variation? And again, if I had historical data, I would do that. I don't have it. I'm going to estimate from the study itself, from the part of the study. And it's asking me if I had the specification, I'll put it here. If I didn't have it, I still can perform the test. In this case, it was provided to us as a good news. So, and they said it was 100 grams to 110 grams. So that's what I want to see with respect to that specification. I'm going to click OK. And yeah, so Minitab is going to give me this analysis for me. And again, I go to the summary report right away. And I want to understand what's going on. And I can see visually, we can see here that we have these traffic lights, I call them, right? This traffic light here. And again, it gives you more explanation. I'm going to move my mouse over a little bit. And we have on the top is, can this measurement system measure or assess the process performance? That's one question I want to answer. And I see send the red, maybe bad. In fact, if I read it's 33.1%, that doesn't seem good. But when I look at the next traffic light over here, these other lights at the bottom, and I see, can you sort good parts from bad? In other words, can this measurement system differentiate from good parts to bad? Can I measure or can I determine that with this system? And it tells me it's in the yellowish, so it may not be as bad as being in the red. but let's see in more detail what that means. When I move over to the right here in this comment section, and again, this is what Assistant does for you. There's some pre-analysis of your data. It tells me that anything that is less than 10%, any of these two numbers, right, the one at the top or the one at the bottom, if they are less than 10% will be acceptable. Anything that is between 10 and 30 will be questionable. Anything greater than 30% is unacceptable. My experience is different industries use a little bit different thresholds depending on what components they are making. I mean, we're looking at perhaps in the food industry, some combination of ingredients. When I measure that, it may be critical. I need to be very precise. So I will go with this standard. I mean, anything less than 10% is acceptable. If it's a little more, I will question the validity of this measurement system. If I'm measuring, let's say, I don't know, maybe boxes of cereal, where the impact to the customer is not as bad, still, we need to be more precise. But let's say the impact is not as great. In that case, some people, they say, well, maybe 10 to 30% is marginal, but it's okay. Depends on the industry, depends on the product you're making. In no particular case, we're going to go with the standard we have here. And one more thing, we have we have the variation report. You can see multiple nice charts and some more charts. And if you are like me, you might want to look at numbers. Or maybe you're not like me and you don't want to look at numbers. But in any case, we have this last table that breaks down the components of variation. And why is this important? Well, it's important because I want to understand. In this case, I see at 33%, which according to my criteria is unacceptable. Well, where is that variation coming from? This table is going to help us discern that. I'm going to explain that in a minute. I just want to show here. We also have a report card that gives you more information. And at this point, I'm going to go back to my script. And that's what I'm talking about. Let's talk about this particular table. And again, it's many numbers, I know, but let's break it down in more detail so to see what we're looking at. First of all, we see those two boxes. You see the study percentage of the study variation and percentage of tolerance. And you see many numbers, but I will explain how to read this in a concise way. So, but what I tell you is when you look at the study variation, what you're looking at is, can this measurement system evaluate process performance and eventually process improvements? When I look at the percentage of tolerance, I'm looking at, can this measurement system evaluate the good parts from bad parts with respect to the specification? That's what these two boxes are measuring. So two different things. When I see, remember we were talking about the criteria, and we say that anything greater than 30% is unacceptable. Where I can see, when I look at my numbers here, and I see right away for percentage of tolerance. In other words, can my measurement system differentiate from good parts to bad parts? It's in the 13%. I would say, well, you know what? I think I'm okay with this. I'm not too concerned about this issue here with these numbers, and I just move on. But when I look at the percentage study variation, certainly I'm not very happy about it, right? It's some concern. I need to investigate, particularly because I'm looking at this number here, this 33%. That's something that I don't like. What's going on here? So it's 33% for the total gauge R&R. But the question is, where is this variation coming from? For that purpose, we look at these two components, the repeatability and reproducibility. And again, I'm going to focus in the moment just on the percentage of study variation because that's where the red flag is indicating I need to do something about, and I see these two numbers. Let me explain first, okay, what is repeatability? Repeatability, when you think about it, what it is the measurement that, let's say one person taking the same measurement of multiple units. So I want to see in multiple times, right? I want to see, can this measurement system When one person is measuring things, can that person get the same results over and over? When I look at, and that's what we call, in some cases, you may have heard about it, some people call it equipment variation. That is how reliable is this equipment, right? It's capable of getting the same number every time by the same person. When I look at the second component, which is reproducibility, what we're talking about is the variation of the measurements when different people measure the same part. So that, remember, we have 3 technicians measuring 10 units 2 times every time. So that's what in some cases we call it this appraiser variation. And why is this important? Well, it's important because it tells me where is the potential variation coming from. So when I see here and I look at these numbers, the biggest of the two is this 28%. So therefore, I should be looking at the reproducibility component. And that means, well, it appears to me that something is going on. So when different people measure the same unit, they get different results, even something is going on there, right? So what I would like to do is maybe find out, go and see these different people, perhaps one with more experience than the other, perhaps the way one person is setting up the unit on the scale or with the instrument, are they doing it the same way? Perhaps, again, it's experience, perhaps it's the method how different people do things. And I've seen this happen in different situations, measuring different type of unit. The equipment, the equipment, the gauge itself, or the piece of device measuring things may be good, but it's the way, the person holds it or takes the measurement that may be different a little bit. So in this case, I will be looking again at the reproducibility component, and I would say, well, what's going on? Is something else happening here? So as a result, I show how to do this study in Minitab very quick, and that's what we have. So, and the next item we have for special is what we call capability analysis. And for capability analysis, what we have is, in this example, 3 different quality assurance inspectors want to see if when they pack these gummy bears bags, it's always within this specification 3.6, 3.7. Those are the specification limits. Is the weight of these bags always consistent? Because obviously they want to make sure the customers get what they pay for. So they go ahead and collect 5 samples randomly from 50 batches and then weigh them all to see what's going on. So what is measurement? What is process capability analysis? We did the measurement system. We understand the variation coming from there. Now that I say yes, I can trust that. Now I can go ahead and proceed to do a process capability, which helps us measure how well the process meets customer specifications, customer requirements. In other words, how well can we measure the voice of the customer? And also can help us to differentiate that you are making improvements to the process. We can compare the before and after. Did we make some change? Is it better than before? It's a tool that can help us determine that. So what do we do in this kind of case, the type of study? We first need to look at how big is the sample size, how is the data collected. We talked about that earlier. Then is the process in control? Before I do this capability analysis, I want to understand, is the process in control? If not, I need to do that first. I need to make sure I address those issues. If assuming is okay, I need to understand also, does the data follow a normal distribution? Some of you who may be new to this terminology, well, you can always come back for more at the next webinar or future webinars and maybe explain more details about what that means. But essentially, Minitab, you can perform all these analyses. You can understand sample size. You can understand some descriptive statistics. You can perform the control chart like I showed earlier. You can do this test for normality. And I'm going to show that in a minute, how to do all of that here. Before we do that, so I'm going to go to my last slide. And I have this data. Again, I can perform with the assistant control charts. In this case, the data was collected in batches of 5. I'm looking at continuous data. So it seems like I'm over here in this X bar R chart. The data is in one column. I'm going to use weight. And I want to use for subgroup because the data was collected in batches of 5 units every time, subgroups. And I want to use the data to estimate the control limit. And that's what I get here. And that's what the chart I showed earlier. So taking a quick look at it, seems like no red flags. The process mean and variation are stable, nothing out of control. Therefore, I can go ahead. I'm going to do a normality test here. And for some of you that are familiar with that, I've been looking at this Anderson-Darling test, in particular the p-value. And if the p-value is greater than 0.05, I can make the assumption that the data is normally distributed, which in this case it is. So let's do the capability study now. So for that purpose, I can show you in Minitab, we have at least 3 different options you can do it. You can follow that here in more detail if you want to do it on your own. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and do this with the assistant. You get that right. So I mean, we have options for everybody here, but I'm going to do it in the assistant, which we are familiar with so far. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to do a capability analysis. I'm looking at continuous data. The data are all in one column, which is weight. I'm going to use for subgroup size, subgroup ID, the batch, and the specification was given to us 3.6 and 3.7. And we don't know the target at this moment. We click OK. And we have right away different charts of all the analysis we've done so far. And we see in the commentary here that the defect rate is 9.53%. That right away is a red flag. Something is going on. We can see visually that some issues with the data that may be potentially outside of these specification limits. Another way to measure how capable the process is, and again, I'm summarizing in lieu of time. Again, perhaps come back for the next webinar or future webinars. But I'm going to be looking at this, what we call this PPK. The PPK measures the overall capability of the process, the performance of the process that your customers will experience over time in the long term. So for that reason, when I look at this PPK, I compare to an industry standard is 1.33, greater than. If in this case we can see it's only 0.44, well, that is again a red flag. When I perform my studies, and again, you can do any of the 3 ways that I explained, you can do, but according to this, the TPK and PPK are less than 1.33. The process not capable, a defect rate of 9.53. We need to improve the process. No question to it. And you can see in Minitab, regardless of where you are, maybe just doing basic control charts or advanced tools, you want to start doing predictions about your data, what's happening in the future. In Minitab, we have, you can see multiple menus, multiple options that you can choose from, and the simplicity to read the chart with the assistant helping you do some analysis that can help you improve your process and deliver to your customers the best value possible. And with that, Shelby, I'm going to pass it on to you.
Sure, thanks. Thanks, Antonio. So for those of you who are not familiar with us as much, I just wanted to say a few words about Minitab, while a couple people can enter in their questions in the question panel on the right. So for nearly 50 years, Minitab has helped companies spot trends, solve problems, and discover valuable insights in their data by delivering a comprehensive and best-in-class suite of statistical analysis and process improvement tools. The companies that use our products and services come in all shapes and sizes, all industries and geographies, including over 85% of the Fortune 500. One thing they all share in common, though, is their commitment to excellence. Our goal is to help them achieve it. In the webinar today, you obviously saw Minitab Statistical Software in action. We also offer Companion by Minitab for operational excellence and continuous improvement project management, quality trainer for online e-learning to master statistics and learn Minitab statistical software. SPM, which some of you may know as Stalford Predictive Modeler for machine learning and predictive analytics. And our newest product, which is right here in the center in yellow, is Minitab Workspace, which enables you to move forward and use powerful visual tools like process maps, brainstorming diagrams, and forms all in one intuitive interface right at your fingertips. As you may or may not know, we also offer public and private trainings along with our statistical consulting services for very specific business problems. But you can find out about more of those services at minitab.com/training. At this point, I would also encourage you to explore minitab.com/support, where you can find our helpful software videos, our contact information for our year-round world-class technical support team, who can help you with all these different questions you have, different data sets, and we also have our blog and case studies, so you can see other companies that have maybe had similar issues and problems that you're facing. We'll include all these links, though, along with the webinar presentation, in that email we're going to send in just a couple of days. So don't worry, it will all be packaged up very nicely. And then on the next slide, right before we get to our official Q&A with Antonio, I just wanted to share that we have more content available on food manufacturing. In April, we'll release our latest ebook, which includes use cases specifically for food manufacturers and explores topics like improving quality, reducing waste, and uncovering savings. Again, a link to sign up will be on our post-webinar email, so don't worry if you aren't able to copy this down on the screen yet. We'll have that all set up for you guys, so it'll be easy to download. And with that, I'll hand it back to Antonio to answer some of your questions.
Yeah, certainly. So, yeah, thank you for the questions. I was looking at it, and thank you for the participation. Good questions overall, and I feel like I'm going to spend a couple of hours here responding back to you guys, but let's address some of let's pick from the variety of questions. There are some a little more basic and more advanced. Let's choose, for instance, we're talking about difference between CPK and PPK. Let's look at, and that's what I show. Let's go here in our process capability. It has to do with process capability. Yeah, some of you have seen, we have noticed right away, there is in our, actually I want to show it here. Okay, in this process performance report out of Assistant in Minitab, I have two sections here for capability statistics. What we call the actual performance, right, purpose overall, and the potential, which is the within. So what the potential capability, I want to talk about this potential first. What the potential tells me is how capable or what level of capability I can achieve if the process and shift and all these things that I see in the process were eliminated. Like I remember I showed the control chart, there are some trends and some patterns that make the process, up and down. If I could eliminate or reduce that variation, the shift and drift, that would be the potential capability. And you think about it, it's something that will be captured in short term. And I mean, I'm measuring my unit and I see how the process is moving, and I can look at it short term, like a kind of short term study. Now, conversely, when I look at, and by the way, and that is calculated based on the subgroup. And remember I showed you how the subgroups, in this case, it's subgroups of 5, right? From 5 to 5. So that is the variation I would see, is how much variation from one subgroup to another subgroup. That's what I would say, I would refer to it like a short term. Now, when I look at the PPK is the overall capability. I'm looking at everything, regardless, right? And think about it as the actual performance of the process that the customer experiences over time. Because again, if I take subgroups, the customer will see the subgroup. When I look at everything, the whole data set in this case, which we call it overall, that's what the customer experiences. And remember, some of you have heard this before, customers don't experience the average, they experience the variation of the process. So that is one of the reason why we have these two. And of course, depending on what the situation is, how we address that. In this case, they seem to be about the same. So we fix one, seems like we can fix the other, right? Or they will change in some way. That is a question about process capability. Let me look at another question we have here, and that's also an interesting question that we're looking at when we look at, let me see that here. Yeah, the question was asked about these numbers here. Let me go to, yeah, we see these numbers here. The total gauge R&R is 33.07. I want to look at just this for now. And when I look at the components of variation, when I look at repeatability and reproducibility, some of you may try to add them up, right? I'm going to add 17.51 plus 28.05, and they don't add up to 33.07. All right. Well, why? Because this data is calculated based using the standard deviation. So in other words, if I want to get exactly the number, the 33.07, I will have to do the 17.51 squared plus 28.0805 squared, add them up, those two numbers, the square of the two numbers, and then do a square root of that. And that will give me exactly 33.07. So again, because I'm looking in terms of variance or standard deviation, that's how the numbers calculate. In this case, we're looking at the standard deviation. That's why it's the numbers don't match exactly, right? Let's see another question we may have here. We have another. Okay. So question about control chart. Let me just talk about how do I choose the difference between one type of control chart, like the two different methods to do the control chart. My recommendation is use the assistant whenever you feel that you maybe need a refresher on your statistics perhaps, or maybe you want to be more confident on how to interpret the data. You are getting up to speed perhaps. And again, it gives you a lot of good valuable information. It does some pre-analysis for you. It doesn't fix the problem for you, but it gives you some good insights versus using the other methodology, which I show here, where, and again, some of you experience, have used this for years maybe, so you know where to find the control charts and you select the control chart. And it gives you diagnosis in terms of running the test, the multiple tests, but also give you the additional information that you see in the assistant. So again, really depends on what you're looking for, how confident you are with the tool. Another question was about, can I do the additional test here with this type of study? I can do it here, and again, there will be a little advanced topic on how I can set up Minitab to do this automatically every time instead of choosing every time, oh, I forgot to select all tests. There's a way you can change your options in Minitab to make it a default. So instead of selecting only one test, you can do all tests at the same time. Well, seems like we are running out of time here. We're top of the hour. And with that, let's see. Yeah, so yeah, seems like time's up. We appreciate everybody for your participation, for your time, for the questions. We wish you guys have a great day. And next time, please join us for the next webinar. We're going to be sending a survey, and please fill it out and send them back to us with your comments. Thank you very much, everyone. And again, we'll talk next time.